Welcome to the Kingdom Educators Podcast, where we empower Christian teachers to grab a hold of heaven's hope-filled perspective so you can activate transformational impact in your classroom and community. I'm your host, Jessica Glover, and I warmly welcome you to wake up to your strategic placement as a kingdom educator, anointed by the Creator and equipped by all of heaven to release the radical goodness of God that will transform lives and reshape education. Welcome to the show, everybody. I am so excited to introduce to you today, Kylea Raines. And I'm so honored to have you, Kylea, with us today because I know that since we've met, that you've gone from feeling alone in the classroom to feeling supported. And one of the key helpers with that has been taking the class that I have online now that's changed names, Burnout to Burning Bright. And we met a couple of years ago at the Wichita area teacher prayer breakfast. And then we reconnected again this year.
Yes.
Yes. So welcome.
Thank you.
I cannot believe that we've actually been in each other's realm, if you will, for a couple of years already.
I know, it's really gone by fast.
Yes.
There's been a lot that's happened too in that time. It's crazy.
I know. And I'm excited to have you share more because some of those changes have been part of your testimony that you're going to share today. But I just want to remind listeners, we are on a unit of sharing testimonies, and the testimony of Jesus is the spirit of prophecy, meaning that in Revelation 19:10, it talks about how when God does something for us, when we share that out loud, we stir up hope in other people that it can happen for them. And that's my heart behind this unit. And having Kylea on today is just to really encourage you wherever you're at, whether you're like, get me to Thanksgiving break, or you are just in that place of like, Lord, how do I have more impact? Just that her testimony would be a great encouragement to you. So thank you, Kylea, for being here. All right. I'd love to have you like share a little bit more about yourself as an educator. As I know, you've had kind of a non-traditional path, and yet I believe God, Kylea, has brought you to the world of education because he has had something unique for you to deposit in the lives of your students. And so would you kick us off with kind of sharing what drew you into the world of education in the first place?
Yeah. So I've known since the time that I was very, very little that I was going to be a teacher. I think it goes back to when I was around the age of 4. Everybody would ask in preschool, like, what do you want to do when you grow up? And I've always been like, I'm going to be a teacher. So I think I really realized why I wanted to be a teacher when I was about in middle school. In middle school, I had a bunch of great teachers, specifically starting in 7th grade, that were just amazing. They helped me to really love learning, I think for the right reasons, other than just feeling like, yay, I can do that worksheet. It was what is going beyond that worksheet that makes me feel so great. And so some of my favorite relationships in this world are with the teachers that I had. Like, we still chat, we still talk, they still ask how things are going. Yeah. And so it kind of really just guided me. When I went to college, I was going to be a high school history teacher. I had done a couple of years of community college, and I had transferred to Missouri Western. And when I sat down with my advisor, my dreams quickly got shot down and I had to pivot. I told him I wanted to teach history, and he asked me why. And I was like, well, I really love history. It's stuff that's happened. It's things that you can relate to. And, kids need to know about that stuff. I mean, it's good to learn. And he's like, well, I'm just curious how you're going to make that happen. And I'm like, what do you mean? He's like, well, you're not a male and you don't coach anything. So you're probably not going to get hired. Yeah, you're probably not going to get hired.
Wow.
Okay, so, at the time, I'm 20, right? So I'm still pretty kind of like impressionable, not really thinking long term about my decisions. And so I'm not sad on how that went because it did lead me to something better, but I had to kind of think about like, well, where do I go from here? So I had thought long and hard about it. I said, the second thing I've always wanted to do is I wanted to teach family consumer sciences. So there's only 3 schools in Missouri that offer that program. So I had to transfer at semester to another school to get out of there. So, I ended up at University of Central Missouri, and I was able to get into we call it FACS, the FACS program. So from there, I graduated and started the journey of finding a job, a whole new adventure. So I have a year experience of teaching in Missouri. I did teach high school out there. I kind of taught a little bit of everything in facts, cooking, one taught, all that. And I was kind of whatever they needed me was what I taught.
Okay.
After that, I decided to go for a change. Well, one day I sat down and I said, I'm going to move to Wichita, Kansas.
Oh, wow.
My dad thought I was crazy. My dad's like, you're going to move 4 hours away to a place you've never been in. And I was like, I don't know what it is, but I feel like I'm being called there.
Wow.
So I interviewed for a position that year.
Online or in person?
Online.
Okay. Still having never been.
Yeah. And that principal, the assistant principal called me for an interview, and they were like really, really serious. They're like, we're getting ready to close interviews on it. We really want to meet you. We're like excited about it. Like, do you want to come out? Yeah, I'm like, well, we can do a phone interview if you want, since you're far away. And I was like, no, if I'm going to interview somewhere, I want to know where I'm going to be teaching.
Good idea.
So I drove out to Wichita in a tornado warning.
Oh, oh my goodness.
Yeah, really kind of where my relationship with God and education started, honestly. Because something just told me, go to Wichita.
Yeah, you just knew. You knew inside your spirit.
Yeah. So I pulled into the parking lot at this school, and it's a beautiful school. It's not new, but it had a new building. It was the second year it was open. And I immediately texted my dad and said, this was a huge mistake. This looks like an elite school. They're not going to hire a second year teacher with 1 year experience. And so I walked in and everything went really, really good. And I drove back and the whole time I was like, man, I'm not going to get that job. There's no way they're going to hire me. The next day they offered me the position.
Wow.
So in August, I picked up and moved out here, spent my first night in a hotel because my apartment wasn't ready until the first day of new teacher orientation. So I technically lived in a hotel downtown in Wichita for my first night.
Which you're already, I feel like, as a teacher, thinking ahead to the first day of school. And there's those like jitters you feel. I mean, peace, right. Jesus, but still, like there's a real like excitement that happens, and you're in a hotel.
Yep. So
you're adventuring, Kylea.
Right. I took this job, and wow, it really opened up my eyes. I'm able to look back now and see all the great things that I got from it, but I'm pretty sure at the time I know I was not feeling that way.
Okay.
Growing up in suburb Missouri, and then my first year teaching was in rural Missouri, I am now out here in urban.
Yes.
And let me tell you, while I look at you now and say, man, I never should have left that school, that was a really great experience, was not my thoughts at the time.
Yeah.
It was really, really rough.
I imagine.
I think my relationship with God had kind of shifted a little bit, and I knew I was there for a purpose.
Yeah.
Like I knew these kids needed me, but at the same time, I was pretty sure I was going to die from the school conditions. Like I was just like, I can't do this. I'm not strong enough for this. I'm not strong enough for these kids. And I stopped listening to God, and I decided like, okay, I got myself out here. I'm going to continue on my own way.
Okay.
And that was a turning point in my life where I went through probably a good couple of years of thinking I'm going to do this on my own before I started trusting God again.
Did you feel that he had left you, or that this just wasn't what you thought he had led you into? Or like what brought you to that point of, man, I'm just going to figure this out on my own. It's too hard to tune in. Or did that even cross your mind?
It was really a lot of self-confidence. I think it was more of, while I didn't feel like it was for me, I feel like the experiences there, I'm like, okay, I've become stronger as a person. And while I can't do this, maybe this is not for me. So I am going to not ask him. I know what I want next, and I'm going to pursue that.
Okay. So almost like pride or self-reliance, like you said. Yeah.
Yeah. So,
and I say that because I think that's easy for us to get into in education is like teachers have this like way about them of like, this is the way it is. I do it this way. Yeah, it works. Yeah. I can figure it out. I pull my bootstraps up, because it's almost like we're entrepreneurs in our own classroom, because you pretty much run your own world, right? Yes. Until you have a district mandate or your principal says no. And so, or at least that's been like that for me. And some of them are, you know, there's more mandates than others. But anyway, I just want to point that out, because I think that probably will resonate with people that it's like, oh, Lord, help me to dial it down, you know, like, so I can hear you.
No, you have to remember that no matter, God still has a plan, and what you think it is or isn't is not always what's in his plan.
Mm-hmm.
So, for example, the next step that I took, I had told myself after I got to Wichita, I was homesick. I wanted to go back to Missouri. So keep in mind, I'm now bouncing back and forth. Like I wanted to go back. So you know what? I have done my time. It's been 2 years. I've done my time. I've had 3 years experience. I am going to go to a school district that is elite, and I'm going to get back closer to home because I'm meant to teach kids who are not having struggles in life. I did get that job, and let me tell you, the worst decision I ever made was doing that. Was
Wow.
going on my own understanding. I lasted 2 months in an elite middle school.
Oh my
Um,
gosh.
the kids were great.
Private school or like just the top of the district scores and things?
It was public, but it's
Okay.
like one of the top rated districts.
Okay.
So what I thought was, oh, I'm gonna be like really well known. I'm gonna go to this great district. I'm gonna make a name for myself. I'm gonna be teacher of the year and all that. And I was placed in conditions where that was never going to happen. I could tell really quickly from the climate they thought that their kids were better than I was because I was coming from Wichita and I don't know how to teach their kind of kids. So
Okay.
it was a matter of 2 months after teaching facts there that I was pretty much chased out of my job.
Okay.
At that point, I decided, I'm like, okay, God, I am really sorry. I belong in Wichita. I should not have done that whole thing. Like, this is my home. This is where I belong.
Mm-hmm.
And so I lived with my dad for a little bit, and I was saving some money to move back, and I was going to come back here and sub.
Mm-hmm.
I moved back to Wichita. It was second semester of that year. And I was like, I'm going to sub in the schools. I'm going to get my name back in. I'm going to explore different buildings, and I'm going to try for a teaching job next year.
Mm-hmm.
So I subbed for 2 months. COVID happened and shut the schools down.
Gosh.
And the only thing I could really get into was working with foster kids, which at the time I was like, ugh. But it really, I think it was all kind of part of God's plan. He had to bring me back because working with these foster kids has really helped me with teaching as well and entering back in a whole new appreciation for what my kids go through. They're not just sitting in the classroom. They're there, but there's so many other things that are influencing where they're at in their lives while they're sitting in your classroom.
Yeah, so many factors.
Yep. So the next year I was able to get back into Wichita schools. Well, the principal that hired me at the first school that I was at my second school. So she hired me back, and I thought, God moves you where he wants you to be, and you don't know how long that purpose is or why that purpose is sometimes. But I've started to learn that there's really a purpose.
Yeah.
I went to a school where I didn't have a classroom. I was teaching on a cart. I was between 3 different floors, 3 different classrooms.
This is when you and I met that year. Yes.
And so once again, I'm like, God, why? Why did you bring me to a school where I cannot impact these kids? I'm more worried about getting to my class on time. The kids got to my classroom before me. They were going into the room I was in and vandalizing things. And I'm like, this isn't sustainable. I did that for 2 years, hoping it would get better. And that did end up ending. And I felt very, very, very destroyed. And I was like, okay, God, like, you don't want me to be a teacher anymore. So there was kind of that whole thing of, I've wanted to be a teacher my whole life. Like, why is this not working out? Am I not a good teacher? That kind of thing. Why aren't the sources around me jumping in to help me be what I need to be a good teacher, so that I can influence my kids? It was shortly after I left there and I started soul searching, because now I'm like, great, I've left the district twice. Here we go. I'm done. I'm fried. Done.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like, they're not going to ever take me back again. And so I had to do some soul searching. Well, God led me to my next journey, and it was more amazing than anything I could ever imagine. I was led to a kind of like an alternative private school here in Wichita. And I wasn't teaching, but I was actually kind of a career counselor.
Okay.
I'm working on my master's in social work and had always wanted to transition from teaching to school social work. I knew I never wanted to leave the schools, but there was something else out there too, maybe, that I wanted to work on. So I fell in love with this school. It was amazing. My relationship with the kids were one-to-one. They were going through all different walks of life. There was homelessness, there was dropout and needing to come back and get their credits done. There was a lot of things. And I think for the first time in a long time, I really felt at peace in education. Wow. I think from there, I learned I'm maybe not meant to be in a classroom setting. That just didn't work out for me. But that doesn't mean that I'm not meant to be in education.
Yeah.
Education is my calling. So I fell in love with this school, made some really great relationships. Unfortunately, that school is running out of fundings. And we did find out in September that we will not be open through June.
Which has been really hard.
Yes. Let me tell you that my relationship that I had with God, I am thankful I really got back.
Mm-hmm.
because without him, I think I would have been completely destroyed
Yeah.
because I was destroyed with relying on him, and not him in a bad way. I mean, I was emotionally destroyed, and
Mm-hmm.
I was like, this is the end. I mean, I didn't know what I was going to do next. I'm like, I think my time in education is officially done. This door is going to be closed. I'm not going back into teaching. I won't go back into the classroom again.
Mm-hmm.
And
Disappointment, shame kind of thing going on,
yes,
right?
it was,
Yeah.
yeah. Well, and it was kind of one of those things. I'm like, man, you brought me to this place that I really, really love, and then this is what happens.
Yeah.
I sat down and did some more praying, which leads me to where I am today. God, you know I belong in education. I think we both know that. Teaching is not an order, and I don't have the credentials to be a school counselor. So what is this next step? And so I started praying, and I was like, okay, I'm going to transition into social work. I don't have to do something I don't want to do forever, but I need to get my foot in the door, and then I'm eventually going to be a school social worker again. God did it even better. I started a new job on Monday, so it's going to be a whole new burst of adventures. And again, the stuff that I'm talking to you guys about, I am now going to have to remember as well that while it's new and scary, this is where God has led me, and he is going to hold my hand, and he's going to help me be successful. So I will now be working in a school in Wichita. I don't know which one yet, but in more of a social work role that I think is really going to help me grow and is going to help me work with kids again in a whole different capacity. So when I left Wichita schools, I was still just like, oh man, they're never going to take me back. Well, I'm kind of back. I'm back with them, but I'm not employed with them. And so God showed me like, hey, it's not done. It's not necessarily what you thought it was going to look like, but it's not done.
I love how you really highlight Kylea well in your story about a man can plan his way, but the Lord orders his steps. That's from the Proverbs. And just knowing that, like, man, when we get out ahead of God, he'll help us get back on the right track. And like reminding us with gentleness, right? It's the kindness of God that leads us to repentance and rest, which is our salvation. And that's not even just salvation's knowing Jesus, but it's like wholeness and healing and getting to, work through the pain of the disappointment of this job that you really loved. And just a month ago, we're like, oh my gosh, I think I'm done. And it's like, he's like, hold on, girl, hold on. I got
he's
you.
like, I got it. I'm waiting for the right time. Calm down.
Yes.
When I interviewed for the position that I'm in, I actually was interviewed for 3 positions. One, I was like, I could do that. One, I was like, please, God, if that's the only thing they'll give me, I'll take it, but I really don't want it. And then there was the school-based position. My first interview, they had accidentally told me that position had been taken. So I didn't even focus on it. I focused on tailoring around the other ones. So I got a second interview, and so I thought it was more like, job specific. I had mentioned very little about my educational background. So the fact that they gave me a school-based position that they made a mistake on, and I didn't even talk about how I'd be good in that position is just beyond me. So I'm telling you, there's just something there.
God.
There's something there that God's like, hey, hello, she's been a teacher. Put her here. She knows kids.
Well, you've shared quite a bit about your story and walking in connection with Jesus and making decisions. Could you share a testimony about I know you learned so much from Burn to Burn Bright about teaching and connection. Sure. Could you share maybe a testimony with us to encourage people?
Yes. One of the things that I gotta say is you don't always realize in the moment the impact that you're making on your kids. And when you're feeling burned out, like that's when you have to really look the most to God to help you find that light. While I was teaching on the cart and I was just going around and around, and it was more of, I can't do this. And while I was focusing on what I couldn't do, I wasn't necessarily thinking about my students. And those kiddos today still reach out. I've been gone from there for 2 years, 2.5 years. And those kids still reach out to me. They are like my biggest supporters. Aww. And it's like, you just, no matter how hard the conditions are, you are influencing those kids. You may not have the best lessons that day. You may not have a classroom. You may not feel like you have things in order, that everything's rush. Take time to sit down and pray. Pray that even through these circumstances, you're there for a purpose, and the purpose is those kids. While you need good working conditions, it's not necessarily about you, it's about them. But you have to have everything you can to give to them. And if you don't have that, that's very hard.
Yeah. Yeah.
One of my favorite things that I can give as an affirmation is I had a kid who I was teaching him during COVID, and he openly admitted to me that he was at home sleeping with his class on. And I felt like, oh my gosh, I am never going to get through to this kid. Like, I mean, because we didn't require them to turn cameras on where I was at. So I knew he was sleeping. He wasn't answering me, but I couldn't like actually wake
No accountability.
So I actually I thought about that kid. After that semester, I didn't have him again. And I was like, oh God, please don't let him drop out, you know? And so the crazy thing is my last work, he was one of my students again.
Oh my goodness.
And yeah.
Wow.
And I was
with credit deficiency, probably.
Yes.
You're helping him to graduate.
And that is the funniest part, because because I'm the one that looked at their transcripts and stuff. And so I'm looking back at his transcript when he had me, and I'm seeing that F there, and I'm like, oh good Lord, I remember those days. And so it was kind of funny. Like, he sat down with me one day. I go, do you remember me? And he's like, yeah, you were my first hour teacher a couple of years ago. I was like, what were you doing? And he goes, I was sleeping. And I was like, well, I knew you were doing something, because I remember very clearly. I was like, are you here? Hey, hello, are you here? And I never heard anything. And I'm like, hey, great. So it was kind of funny, but he looked at me and he goes, no, he's like, I was sleeping. He goes, it's first hour. Like, what was I going to be doing? And I was like, no, I'm not going to lie. I kind of got to give that to you. It was first hour and you were on the computer. So I actually got to watch his journey again for another year in a different capacity. And let me tell you, that freshman kid that was sleeping in front of a computer during COVID is now getting ready to graduate with a diploma.
Yay!
Yes. His journey wasn't easy either. But once I reconnected with him, I started praying again. I mean, because he didn't start off making the best decisions either at this new place. And it was more of like, God, help him. Help him.
Yeah.
This is his second chance, and he doesn't have much after this. This is a get it done, or this is your GED that you're gonna have to go get. And I'm like, please let him utilize the supports he has. When we had conferences with our kids that it's closing, pure panic went through him. He had not been giving it his all, but he was not quite there. So we were actually going through this journey together of, this is what's next for you. You've made it this far. This is what you have. This is what we've got to do. Well, luckily for him, he had enough credits that he could test into this other program. All he had to do was take 4 subject tests. And if he passed them well enough, he automatically had his diploma. He was going to graduate quicker than he would have with us if we stayed open.
Oh, wow.
That's another thing that I want to point out there, teachers, too. Even if they don't show it in the classroom, they have smarts. I mean, they're smarts. And to remember to find that smart and to work with it is going to be very beneficial for them in the long run. Rather than, because I was one of those teachers that used to be like, they just don't want to learn. They sleep, they don't care. I'm going to focus on the ones who I know do want to learn, which is okay. Yeah. You want to focus on those kids, but the ones who are sleeping in class, and I don't want to sound cliche because I know they've all heard this in, PD day, and they're probably like, oh, yeah, right. The ones who are sleeping through class, a lot of them really are not sleeping through class because they want to. They're sleeping through class because they have other things going on that they're not telling you about. And if you don't have that relationship, you're not going to know. A lot of them, especially out here helping support parents or taking care of siblings, they live in some terrible apartment conditions with multiple people and don't have their own room and that kind of thing. But I am proud to say that this kid, so my last day on Wednesday, I was a little hesitant in telling him I was leaving. I was in the bathroom and I came out and he came up to me and he's like, well, I guess I'm going to say my goodbye now. And I'm like, somebody told you? Aww. And one of the staff members had went ahead and told him, which was okay. And so he came up and he gave me like the biggest hug. And he's like, oh,
that's so
great.
He's
like, what school are you going to next? Because I may need to go there. And I was like, well, I was like, you have to let you go. Like, you are not going to go there because you are going to graduate, mister. I'm like, yes. I'm like, you've passed your test. I go, you are on the downhill slide. I said, and these people here are going to keep me updated on you, and I'm going to know that you graduated or not. So I'm like, I'm counting on it. I'm counting on a text saying you fully did it. and you're getting your diplomas in your hand.
Yes. That's so good.
I'm like,
Yeah.
I might be in elementary, middle school, or high school, and those are all going down from where you're going. So do not end up back with me as much as I love you.
Right. Yes. Oh, that's so good. So just recapping real quick, what I hear you saying is really just need to make sure, like John 15, you're abiding in the vine so that you can move from God's sustenance. Everything that he has becomes yours, and you will be when you're connected with him. And then that's when you have enough to give away to students. And so just highlighting that for us teachers, that as we're going about what we're doing, as long as you're abiding in the vine, you're receiving what you need, God's fruit's going to flow out of you. And I just feel like Kylea's testimony is really speaking about that today. Well, before we wrap up, Kylea, would you like to just pray over our listeners today as they're pressing into teach connected with God and to stay fired up as we, I guess, aiming toward Christmas break, but really like having God's vision for this school year?
Yeah, would love to. Dear Lord, please bless these teachers who are along this journey. We know that they have a greater impact on our kids, and not just our kids, but our families and our community as well. And each of those teachers have been placed into their lives for a specific purpose. You are going to use them in ways they can't imagine. Encourage them to just not give up. Don't throw in the towel. There is a purpose for them, and they do belong in these kids' lives. So when they feel like they can't anymore, wrap your arms around them, give them a sign, something to guide them back to you and to remind them that they are not going through this alone. They have the best support there is, and that is the God above them.
Yeah, we just thank you for this time, Lord. And I ask, Lord, that you bless Kylea as she goes on to engage with this new adventure with you in social work. And I just speak blessing and life over everyone who is listening. And we just thank you, Lord, for your invitation to work with us. In Jesus' name.
Thanks for tuning into this podcast. Please be sure to rate, review, subscribe, and share with your friends in education so they too can be strengthened and encouraged in living their kingdom identity out loud in this pivotal hour. And please visit kingdomeducators.com to receive your Kingdom Educator Daily Truth Declarations, my encouraging newsletter, and be the first to know about my newest resources online and in-person events. And be sure to find me on the socials at kingdom.educators. Until next time, don't forget you are a history maker, and what you do every day is transforming lives.